This is how one of my clients bought a $9 million property with no money down and made $6 million on it in 3 months' time. So this property is in Sydney, and this property was purchased for $9 million. And I'm going to show you how we were able to structure the deal so that we end up having no money tied down into the property, but at the same time make $6 million out of the deal. First of all, we have to understand two metrics, okay? We have to understand rental income and cap rate, okay? Because rental income and cap rate basically determines the value of a property, a commercial property. Okay, so simply said, let's say if there's a property that's returning you $100,000 per annum in rent, and if the cap rate or yield is 5%, then the property value is, roughly $2 million. Why is that? Because it's 100K divided by 5% equals $2 million. Okay, so rental income has a direct correlation to the value of the property. Whenever you're looking at commercial property, you have to look at, okay, what's the rental income and then what's the cap rate or the yield for that market. That way you can very easily figure out what the value of the property is. So once you understand these two concepts, it makes the rest of the case study a lot easier to understand. Okay, so the property that my client bought at the time had a rental income of $450,000 net per annum. And then at the time, the market cap rate or market yield was 5%, okay, which meant the property was worth about $9 million. That's the price that we agreed to. But what's really interesting is that even though the property was getting $450,000 net per annum, it was actually under rented. The market rent at the time was closer to $800,000, actually. So the market rent was actually more like $800,000. At $800,000, at the same cap rate of 5%, how much is the property worth? $16 million, okay? So my client bought the property for $9 million and changed it to $16 million within 3 months because he was able to bring the rent from $450K to $800K within 3 months. So how did we do this? Okay, so that's the question. That's what everybody wants to learn. Typically, if you were to buy $9 million, this is how you would typically structure the deal. Okay, so let's say your borrowing price is $9 million. You're gonna borrow 65% from the bank, okay, which is roughly, let's call it 6 million loan. And then you're gonna pay for the 35% deposit balance, which is, let's call it 3 million. That's gonna be cash. And then you've got purchasing costs like stamp duty and legal fees and all that. So a property like this, the stamp duty is gonna be roughly about 600,000. And you've got legal fees and all that, so stamps, legal, etc. It's, let's just call it roughly 600K. So typically you would need $3.6 million cash to buy a $9 million property. That's how you would typically do it. Okay. So I'm going to show you how my client put it off without that much cash. The structuring of the deal is the most important part. If you can structure the deal properly, then you can pull this off. If you can't structure it properly, then this strategy would not work. This is how we negotiate a deal. We said to the owner, hey, look, we're happy to give you $9 million for the property. However, we want 6 months settlement period. So why is that important? Now, typically for commercial property, settlements like 45 to 60 days, typically. But we wanted 6 months settlement because that's a really important part, because we want the opportunity to go and speak to the existing tenants and potentially renegotiate the existing leases. So which is point number 2, is that we want access to the tenants, okay, during the 6 months period. Because what we want to do, because there were six tenants in the building, because what we want to do, remember, the rent at the time was $450K. And the reason why it was really under rented was because the owner at the time, he's retired, he's paid the property off. He just didn't want stress in his life. So he was just happy to keep the tenants on and lower rent. And we see that very, very often. So a lot of owners who's owned properties for a very long time, who manage the property themselves, they typically don't know what the market rents are. As long as the tenant keeps paying rent and is not causing a lot of stress in their lives, they typically don't worry too much about it. So that's why, due to, I suppose, poor management, the rent was only 450K, but the market rent was more like 800K. So the idea is we want access to these tenants so that we can bring the rent from 450K to 800K before settlement occurs. Here's point number 3, is that we will provide a 5% deposit on exchange of contract. The only time that money changed hands was the 5%, which is 450K. We put a 5% deposit down to exchange contracts, and that money was held in a trust account with the lawyer. That money was not spent, not touched, because it's during the settlement period. Now you're saying, hey Will, you said there's no money down. What I'm saying is, by the time this strategy gets completed, no money was locked into the deal. Now, to be frank, a lot of people have access to 450K, either through the home equity, through savings, whatever. Okay, you just need to be able to access that money temporarily for 6 months to pull off the deal. Okay, so that's how we structured the deal. We said, hey, Mr. Seller, we'll pay you the $9 million that you want. We want 6 months settlement. We want access to the tenants, as in we want to be able to contact and negotiate with the tenants. And we'll give you 5% on exchange, but that money sits in a trust account with the lawyer until the property settles. Cool, it was all agreed. So as soon as contracts were exchanged, we started talking to the tenants straight away. The tenants were all on expired leases or on monthly leases. The tenants know that they're paying under market rent. Like, they know, they're not silly. And they know that one day will come when someone's gonna say, hey, look, you're gonna increase your rent now, all right? They've had the privilege of paying a discounted rent for a long time. Within the first 3 months after exchange, we were able to renegotiate with 5 out of the 6 tenants at the new rents. The last tenant, number 6, he just simply couldn't pay that extra rent. So he decided to move out. But within that 3 months time, he moved out and we actually found another tenant externally to replace him. So within 3 months, we're able to bring the rent from 450 to 800K. Immediately after we've secured 6 new leases, we ordered a valuation. The valuation came in at $16 million because of the new rent. Remember, there was a 5% cap rate for that market. So the new valuation came in at $16 million, and we went to the bank, hey, we want to borrow money for this property. The valuation is $16 million, how much money can you give us? The bank says, well, we could probably lend you 60%. Great. So what's 60% of $16 million, all right? So the bank loan was roughly $9.6 million. So that $9.6 million was enough to pay for the $9 million that the owner wanted, plus the stamp duty and closing costs and all that type of stuff. So by the time we hit the 6-month settlement period, the client had no money locked into the deal. So that 5% deposit that he put down, he got that back. He's sitting on a property that's cash flowing him 800 grand minus obviously interest rates. And he's got a property that's got over $6 million of equity profit in it. And we pulled this whole deal off in 3 months. By doing this, the client secured a $9 million property with no money down that has $6 million profit, equity profit in it, and it's cash flowing him $250,000 a year in cash flow, positive cash flow, for free. So all it takes is knowing the market, obviously identifying properties that are under rented, undervalued, knowing how to structure the deals properly, which I've explained right here, but also have the knowledge on how to execute on it. But what I will say is this entire deal, the biggest risk is if you don't pull it off, you can lose your deposit. Okay, so you can lose this $450,000 that you put into the deal temporarily. Yeah, that's the biggest risk. A lot of people don't want to take that risk, and that's fine because that might be their entire life savings. Totally get it, all right? But for those who are willing to take that risk, this is something that you can do, that a lot of people can do, a lot of people have the resources to do, is whether or not you have the risk appetite in doing it. If you want to work with a professional who's done this before and who can hold your hand through the process, or who can teach you how to do it, then hit me up. So guys, if you want to know how to structure deals like this, how to find deals like this, you want to understand the ins and outs of property, commercial property, and how millionaires make money, then definitely follow for more tips and more education videos. And if you want to hit me up for some advice, then definitely hit the link below. I'll see you in the next video.